Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Frame. I'm sitting here today with Evan Trine. Let me introduce myself. My name is Paul Loya. I'm the Deputy Director of Exhibitions and Collections here at the Long Beach Museum of Art. And today I'm sitting, again, with Evan Trine, who's a participating artist in our group exhibition, Color Field, which is an exploration into the museum's permanent collection of color field artists and also bringing in 8 contemporary color field artists of Southern California color field artists that are working in the genre today. So welcome, Evan.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for coming by. Nice to sit with you and have this nice casual conversation about your work and just kind of about the breadth of the show. And I think, jumping off, I've been following your work for a very long time. I think more than a lot of artists. And I saw your undergrad show at Azusa when you were there, and then your graduate show at Claremont, and then even post shows at Roberts Projects and other shows that you've done. And I've always really appreciated your work and your approach to it, and especially coming from utilizing photography in a painterly manner. Right. And that's I've always found that approach very interesting, and so that's why I chose you for this show, because I felt like you really were encompassing a color field through photography, right, but in a painterly way. Yeah. Can you maybe, I think, to kind of bring people up to speed, this is Evan's piece here, every picture of Vanessa, and maybe you want to tell people, give an intro about your work and about this work?
I guess that's a good sum up, which I've been working on lately, but it's an easy way to say, I make paintings with all the tools of a photographer. Mm-hmm. But this piece is from a series that I started in grad school, and I'm still kind of constantly developing. It's the color grids. Each square is a condensed version of a photograph, mm-hmm, brought down to a single pixel. So this one is, I think, 88. I think it's an 11 by 8 grid. It's 88 different pictures, each one condensed through an algorithm, blending every color in the photo to get an average, and then arranged in a grid. So this one, again, the title is Every Picture of Vanessa. This was every picture of my wife, Vanessa, that I had on my phone at the time of making the piece.
Okay.
And this was a series of grids at the time that I was doing, of portraits of people in my life and friends and famous people and whatever, and making groups of them. But this series is probably, I've been doing it the longest, actually 23, 10 years now. And I think this piece is from 2018. Yeah. So generally, maybe jumping ahead, but it feels like a mix between, it's very painterly as far as the composition, the image, the way that you interact with it, but there's no paint at all. Mm-hmm. It's printed on a handmade rag paper and then mounted to aluminum. They're all uniques. There's no additions, so they function as a painting that way. But I just don't like paint, so I don't use it.
Was photography always a medium of choice for you, or was that?
Yeah, I think in undergrad, my major was studio art with an emphasis in photography.
Okay.
I was always interested in photography, and at the time I was doing stuff very much in the vein of Louis Baltz, Uta Bart kind of thing, really straight photography, but trying to find moments of abstraction, mm-hmm, even if it's something that's still a recognizable object. Right. I would say probably actually those two, Uta for sure.
Yeah.
It's my favorite, potentially my favorite artist of all time, certainly my favorite photographer of all time. But she can photograph just her stucco wall in her backyard.
Yeah.
And it feels like a really beautiful abstraction. I think I was always interested in using the camera, but I've always liked paintings. Mm. My favorite artists are paintings. My favorite work to view is painting. I just don't like to make paintings.
Why is
paint. I don't know. I think it's a lack of control.
Yeah.
And there's something absolute about a camera. Mm-hmm. There's limitations, there's structures, there's an existing frame that you have to. So there's sort of I guess I teach photography as well, and when I teach lessons on potentially let's do an assignment where we do an abstract work, I tell students, effectively imagine you're walking around with a frame and you have to frame something that exists in the real world that feels maybe like it doesn't, or feels like you might be able to abstract it. I think there's something interesting also about a medium that inherently cannot be abstract.
Yeah.
Truly, because you have to photograph something.
Right.
So then finding ways to make an abstraction using that tool. So either the way that Uda would do it a lot, taking it out of focus, or potentially framing something in a way that you don't view it as a representation of the object. You might just look at the formal qualities of it.
Right.
So like my undergrad show was these really high-res photos of like maybe, a 6x6 square inch section of a picnic table at elementary schools that were local to my house.
Yeah.
So it was like scuffs and like gum and just like spills and like all these things that looked exactly like a painting I would probably make.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to do any paint.
Yeah.
Or think of it, I just had to find it. I
Right.
think that hunt was always really fun.
Yeah. No, I love that work.
Yeah, then in grad school, taking that and developing it further, removing a lot of those photographic origins even further to where you get this, where this is all photographic origins. I mean, it's all source photographs, but there's nothing really left of them.
Right.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think I think taking it even further about, like removing, like, 'cause, with the camera, you still have the artist's hand in there too, and so you're, the f-stop and the fixture and your eye, but then now you're just using source material.
Right.
So I think is also an interesting factor of removing the artist's hand completely out of that
Yeah.
process,
For sure. There was a transition in grad school where I was using I started to abstract the images even more,
Yeah.
but they were also pictures I had taken.
Right.
Some of the first grids I made the idea came from, I think it was a billboard that was like, it had a logo. It was clearly for like a bank, but the logo was just 4 squares. It was like green, blue, green, blue. But it was clearly supposed to be the earth, just a very rudimentary version. I was driving by and I was like, oh, interesting. And then I just thought, like, what if you condense the whole earth into a pixel, color-wise? And then I was thinking of what if I could take like the eyedropper tool from Photoshop and just grab colors from around the city and then average them? What would be the average color of Los Angeles or whatever? Yeah. So then I started thinking of it that way. One of the first ones I did, the one is I took a satellite image of greater Los Angeles and greater New York, condensed them into the average color and then put them side by side. And it's this big diptych of really similar greenish grays.
Yes.
But that was when I started using other images that I didn't take.
Yeah.
And then I started going from there and gathering old family photographs.
Yeah.
Started scanning a lot of film, and then finding pictures of billboards or like landmarks, and it just started spiraling. I now do work or grids where I take images of really, like 8 red paintings from the collection of MoMA
right. Yeah.
or whatever. So like I grabbed those. So yeah, a big part of that is just now there's an unending amount of source material.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have to be worried about that. I can just go get it wherever I want to get it.
Yeah.
So.
And is there like how do I want to say this? Like, is there a vision you see for that? Like, why are you continually moving your hand away from it? Like, is there like, moving your hand out of that process?
So it wasn't intentional, I don't think. The first work I did in grad school that was really abstracting even further was very much about my hand. And actually, the work I've made since this definitely gets reintroduced physically
Right. So you still are
but-
picking each one of, like, you're picking out the compositions of
For
these.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the grids definitely. There's a removal there in.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't take a lot of these source photographs
Sure.
anymore. But and also the algorithm, that is completely not determined by me. How the colors end up being compressed.
Yeah.
But then the part that takes a lot of time is once I have these 88 squares, how do I arrange them?
Yeah.
Some of them go pretty quick. I can't remember for this one. Some of them, I just kind of throw them in there and I'm like, ooh, that looks pretty good. And I
Yeah.
maybe mess with it for half hour and then I'm like, I actually like that. And some take days where I keep coming back to it.
Right.
The smaller ones end up being tougher, like a 2x3 where it's like, okay, mathematically there are only like 18 versions that I can do,
Right, yeah.
but I can't figure out which one is the one that I really, really like. But yeah, that's where I feel like and then also I think that's part of what separates it from potentially other color grids throughout art history, where there's a randomness to it intentionally. So it's like about like, let's draw a color and that's what I paint.
Right.
And then, so this is very much not that.
Yeah.
I have no control for a little bit,
Right.
and then I have total control
Yeah.
for the next
Yeah,
bit.
and I always love that balance in between that. You go back to that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a nice, back and forth conversation
Right.
that you're having with the work. And I think that brings it, like, and speaking of Photoshop too, I was just reading the article about the new, the AI Photoshop that's coming out, where it's like now
I
you
saw
just
that too.
where you just speak to it and then it does it, which I'm like, which then brought up a lot of questions in my head, like, where is the artist's hand? How far is it being removed? Where now anybody can just speak to Photoshop, because Photoshop, even though you're manipulating it in the software, like you still have there's still an artistry to it and a talent that of how far you could push that image
Right.
and so anyways, it's just kind of like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well,
that
it's
take.
interesting. I have some friends who are in the music industry, and they're having a similar conversation where it's like, where is the human going to be needed? Mm-hmm. And then we went back to like, well, what about with synthesized instruments in the 80s, where it's like, you don't need strings to come into the studio anymore.
Yeah.
I got strings right here on my keyboard or whatever.
Right.
So everything evolves, and then it's figuring out how to utilize that still as the controlling person with a brain to say like, all right, here's what I'm going to do with it. But yeah, if anything, it's just going to make photo rendering easier. And I do some of that freelance, which would be very convenient to be like, oh, 3 hours of photoshopping I don't have to do. I can just be like, hey, can you make this person blonde or whatever? I mean, like,
I mean, my friend was doing it like literally on his Instagram live or reel yesterday, and just
crazy.
like, and just doing this thing of, it was Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and like repeating and putting in a backdrop of like a water park, and I was like, what the heck? And he was just doing it like just in a reel and like just on the spot. And I was like, this is insane. Like how fast this is, when it would take you for quite a while to do that. So I don't know. It's interesting to see where everything will kind of go. It's like kind of a new jumping off point.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
I don't imagine I will be interested in using any of it, but not for work at least.
Yeah.
But it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I mean, speaking of technology too, like I think has like the way the tools of photography have progressed, has that helped like you push your work further? Like I know with the inks and the printer quality and all those type of things, like how does that play a role in your work?
Yeah, it's interesting. In undergrad and part of grad school, I mean, I was actually starting in high school.
Yeah.
I was like such a photographic purist. I was like, only film. I develop my own film in the darkroom. I print everything in the darkroom. Color is stupid. Digital is stupid. Like this is like early 2000s, so there weren't really good like digital cameras that were affordable yet. But then even in undergrad, I was like just shooting with my analog Hasselblad a lot, scanning those. And then for my thesis show, I was like, but if I rent like a digital Hasselblad and I can print this incredibly sharp picture like the size of a wall, it's silly to not embrace that.
Right.
And then now, again, like I don't take a lot of photos myself anymore. But I do some of the work, not this work, but some of my other work where it's more manipulation of the print. I have a printer that I've had for, let's see, maybe since 2011, so
Oh, wow.
12 years.
Yeah.
It's a Canon printer, and it is a workhorse, and I love that like a child.
Yeah.
But it's like, if that printer dies, and I've beat it to shit, like
Yeah.
I ruined that printer, and it's
Yeah.
still alive somehow. And they don't make it, they don't make software, they don't make hardware for it anymore, they don't make replacement, like nothing. And so I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be screwed when this thing eventually dies on me.
Yeah.
But there's, I think, I'm gonna have to figure out what I'll do with that. But as far as like printing, I figured out a couple years ago, like, I can't do that. That's a science on its own completely.
Right.
And it's brilliant artists that can make good prints. So I have somebody who makes my prints for me, and somebody who makes my frames for me and everything else, because it's just like,
Yeah.
it's too difficult. But I think definitely there's something with the mechanisms of, I mean, I would probably go back and do a body of work with my old film camera too. So I mean, like, I would use all of it. I still have Photoshop CS6, which is from like 2006.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't want to get the new one. Like it's probably a creature of habit kind of thing where I'm like, I like the system that I like. I don't need anything else. But then I utilize brand new technology all the time when I need to make something like this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Because I mean, and I picked, this is like from 2018, where you've explored beyond this body of work, where you've gone into actually taking the printer and manipulating the paper and the image while it's being done, which I think is an interesting way to create your work. And maybe you want to speak to that.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it was just starting with something that a professor of mine said to me in grad school, where I had some images that were just kind of like straight prints that I made. And he just said, like, why don't you just fuck it up more? Like, very kind of offhand. I don't think he meant it to be the lasting thing from my grad school experience, but like that 5 words or whatever is like, oh yeah, that's how I've just like developed new bodies of work.
Right.
And like, okay, yeah, how can I mess this up even more?
Yeah.
And so I was, making prints on my medium format printer that I then can scan high res and print larger, and thinking like, what can I do to screw this up as it comes out? And I started to stall the page as the print head would move on it, and then I would yank it backwards and it would bleed, and I would force it to go through too quickly, and then I would send it through multiple times. And then I figured out that I could rearrange the ink cartridges in my printer by removing the chip and putting it on a different ink. So I might have cyan in the yellow spot and photo magenta in the black spot and light gray in the, like, moving them all around.
Yeah.
Essentially, like, again, talking about hand, how can I reintroduce me into a machine that is supposed to be completely without that? And initially the idea was, how can I send an image from the computer through the printer with having neither device understand that they're making something incorrect, and then my intervention changes that. Initially, it was just, let me rearrange the inks, print out a picture, and like the sky is now not blue, it's magenta.
Yeah.
But the computer and the printer feel like they did their job correctly. And it was my intervention that changed that. And then I was like, well, now actually, let me send the paper through 5 times with different arrangements of ink, and manipulating it, and making the inks bleed and making them run and flipping it over. And and then that started to feel, the process was like really, whoa, this is physical. This feels like painting.
Yeah.
Or what, when I hang out with my painter friends, or I've been around painters my whole life, where they make a gesture and then look and then think, like, what do I do next? And then make a gesture and that kind of thing. That's the process that it turned into. And I was like, oh, this is the closest I can get while still using the tools that I like to creating something that has a physical process to it. Whereas these, it all ends up being on the computer, and then I go like, the file's done, and I send it to Jason, and he does it, and then he sends it to Steve, and then I get this, and I'm like, great, it's done, perfect. Which is awesome, and I love these, and I love that they're really perfect, and they have these human moments because the paper's handmade.
Yeah.
But it's different than other bodies of work that I made, for sure.
Yeah, and that's one thing. And I included these because I thought of like, the way you're utilizing color, and then also, but I always love the way you're using the making the point to use the type of paper that you're using, that that the ink would soak through that type of paper, and then it had like that painter aspect to it.
Yeah, so it's like a rag fiber paper. So when it's loose, it kind of feels like a thick textile. And the ink, instead of laying on top of it like a coated paper would, it really soaks into the fibers. And then I don't face them with anything, which you might not be able to tell, but like, there's no plexi, no museum glass, no nothing, because there needs to be this physicality that you can get close to it.
Yeah.
Which has proved problematic because they're really fragile to touch and everything. But I think the surface is like unbeatable.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you were exploring, and I don't know, and maybe you want to speak to this, but it was you were exploring a body of work that was all family portraits.
Yeah.
And I remember visiting you on a couple studio visits, and then, you even had made like a railing, like it was like these photo props that you would like do at studios, and I loved that body of work. So it was so fast because there were these things that had this like, you would just tap into your memory of going to those studios with your family and taking those awkward portraits and the kind of the trauma of it all. And so doing
that ended up, or that started when I was gathering the source photos for the body of grids that were portraits or groups of portraits. So I was getting old family photos and old school photos, and I was gathering them from friends. And then looking at those by themselves, and my dealer at the time was like, these are interesting on their own. And I was like, I think they might be as well. So I made a couple really large test prints of just like my sister's third grade school portrait.
Yeah.
Like 8 feet tall in the studio. And just to see if it's as interesting as it sounds in my head. And then people would come into the studio and be looking at stuff like this and then be like, what's with the like third grade girl? And I'm like, that's my sister. I don't know. I'm still working on it. And then I'd print a couple more, and then everyone would kind of come in and be like, this is great. I love this. What is that?
Yeah.
And everyone had this same connection. I want to do that body of work. I want to show that body of work at some point, but nobody would do it because I think part of what the appeal to me was imagining walking into a gallery and seeing a bunch of literally like school photos, family photos from the mall, from school, from the 90s, printed like 6 feet tall. Yeah. And that's it. Nothing's done to them. That someone might walk in and kind of be knocked on their heels by like the blunt stupidity of it. Yeah. Just kind of like what is happening? Yeah. Almost the way that like when I see like some Baldessari or Ruchet work where it's just like so funny in a very plain, simple way. Yeah. But it's not laugh out loud funny. It's just like there's some irony to it. Yes. And then, but immediately everyone who sees that work, it's just like, oh yeah, that's a weird thing that we all did. Why do we all have these pictures? And like, they only are made to exist in your wallet or on your mantle or whatever. And if we talk about that will be the remainder of it because I have so much to talk about that. But but eventually it was like, I'm going to delve into this like experience that we all had and then pick apart all the pieces of it. Right. And it's so fascinating. And at some point, someone will let me do that show. Yeah. But it probably won't be soon. But that's all. That's just like back pocket for down the road when. That was amazing. Well, the fact that you went in and you actually made, you had the banister made, but it was like a prop. It's only this big. It's only a quarter. I bought a big fake tree. Yeah. For like the fall school portrait where you're like leaning up against the tree. Yeah. I made like the basketball team school fold out. With but I made it 6 feet tall. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that one. Yeah. I went deep on that. You did, yeah.
But I think you have to, you know, it's like, it's those.
Yeah, I had to. I just kept, people kept coming in or being like, this is the most interesting work you've ever made. I was like, okay. Like curators coming in.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's not just like my friends who will just say that they love your stuff because
Sure.
they're your friend.
Yeah.
And then, but my dealer at the time didn't want to do it. And understandably, how are they going to sell that work,
Yeah.
you know? So I get it, but yeah.
And like, yeah, and speaking, and yeah, I thought it was great. I'm excited to see where you kind of go with that, because I remember I visited you a couple times.
Yeah.
In the breadth of that, and I was like, oh, like, yeah, these are interesting.
It kind of went back to some undergrad era mentality where I'm like, nothing needs to be done to these photos. There's a purity to just the thing.
Yeah.
And with something that is an experience that everyone who looks at this will like immediately have a reference point. That's another thing that somehow fits into this conversation, where it's like photography.
Yeah.
Everybody has an access point to photography because everybody's taken a picture before. Versus like maybe some of these paintings or a sculpture where someone could see it. I'm talking about the general someone.
Yeah.
And be like, I've never even held a paintbrush before, so I don't even feel like I can have an opinion about this. But people feel that way about this work when they find out it's a photograph or has photographic origins. They're just immediately, I mean, the most basic question is, how is it a photograph? Why? Where?
Yeah.
This isn't a photograph anything like I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So I like that. If we go back to why photography, I like that access point that everybody has.
Yeah.
Because there's an experience that they can have, a personal experience they can have with the work right away.
Right. Yeah.
From their knowledge of what photography can be, and then maybe my work might add something or widen their experience of potentially what a photograph can be. It happens with students a lot at the end of the semester whenever I'm like, by the way, if you guys are ever curious what my work looks like, here's what I make, and show them this, and I'm teaching like Photo 101, and they're like, it's not a picture, what are you talking about? What camera did you use? I'm like, it's not, I didn't take any of the pictures.
Yeah.
But like, you know, so
Yeah.
it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. It's like, it's like your work just like expand. There's so many questions to be asked, you know, and I love that about it. It explores so much, so many
Right.
different elements, you know. And yeah, and I think that, you know, people don't know what your undergrad looked like. It was these color field-esque paintings, and I thought about those when putting the show together. I was thinking about these
Right.
tabletops, and I loved them because I immediately, I drew that connection to those tabletops and all the little, you know, the nicks and you know, little flaws in the
Right.
table that were from the children's use, you know, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, and even the colors of it were like that orange, you know, that tabletop orange
like
and that
the
blue, and you
and
just
the
like
faded yellow.
yeah, and you had this immediate connection to it. Like, I know what that is, you know, even though it was so abstract.
Sure.
You're like, I know what that is, but I don't know what it is, you know? And
the issue with that work ended up being, people were saying, what kind of paint is it? It's so flat.
Yeah.
I was like, it's not a paint, it's a photo. And they go,
Yeah.
oh, is it a photo of a painting?
Right.
I'm like, why would I do that?
Yeah.
The amount of people who have asked, like, do you take photographs of paintings? I was like, why? What?
Yeah.
No, I don't. That's an insane thing to do.
or is it?
But no, I mean, like, I'll take a picture of a picture of a painting because I like it, but then I'm not gonna
Right.
like. Well, okay, people have done it, but I'm just saying that's not what I do.
Right, yeah.
But
I think scale too also plays an important part of your
sure.
work, you know, because these weren't like these, like, you know, 3 by small little squares.
wasn't life
They were
size,
48
yeah.
by 48, I think.
no, 60 by 60.
60 by 60,
Yeah,
so they were
big.
huge, and I think that also plays a huge
Of maybe like a 6 by 6 inch swap.
Yes.
So I mean, everything was scaled up. So what was maybe like a scuff from a sneaker
Yeah.
looked like maybe a big paintbrush
Yeah.
mark or something like that. So yeah.
and maybe like why has the importance of scale been such a prominent thing in your work?
I think it probably goes back to like just a very core experience of physical experience of seeing work.
Yeah.
That's my size or bigger than me.
Yeah.
That, again, I've had professors who are like, yeah, you just do the like supersize me trick, where it's like a gimmick, and I'm like, you can call it a gimmick, but it fucking works.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's like Rima's piece out here. I'm like, that piece is brilliant, and it would be a very different piece this big. It would be a brilliant piece this big. It's not the same thing. You can't have a physical experience.
Yeah.
And so it's like just being young, like seeing a Rothko.
Yes.
And being like, oh, I can live inside this thing. Or this young Yolan, or like these other works that at scale, they just translate differently.
Yeah.
And it's not better or worse, but the pieces that I find, I would say forever. As far as abstract work, which is what I'm interested in, and work that focuses on color, the bigger ones have had bigger impacts on me.
Yeah.
Or the experience I have with that versus the experience I have with the smaller work, I'm just more interested in that.
Yeah.
So, like I could make this big and it would be something nice,
Yeah.
but this is different when you can stand in front of it and have that kind of experience. So it's just very simple. There's a physical experience you can have that you can't with something small.
I mean, that was part of the philosophy with the color field painters as well, was the scale and stepping into that and feeling the breadth of the work, you know, and being able to enter into that void, essentially. And I mean, even your graduate show at Claremont was like, we were walking into that space and it was like all the works were huge.
Yeah, that was dumb. I mean, I made a piece that was 8 by 16 feet. Like, that was so silly. I don't know what I was going to do with
But the
it.
space was huge too.
Yes. Oh, no, but I mean, it was ambitious.
It was
in
ambitious,
scale,
yeah.
but then that's why I was able to start working with the dealer that picked me up, was because he walked in and was like, these are ready to go.
Yeah.
There's not, you know what I mean? Like, what he was saying was like, I could take this off this wall and just sell it right now. It's not like, these are good, but they need to be bigger and better frames or whatever.
Sure.
So it was like, it paid off.
Sure.
But that show cost me like a year of rent to make.
Sure.
And it was a risk.
It was. It was beautiful.
And I didn't know what to do with a lot of the big pieces. I ended up giving away to schools because I gave one to Claremont, then Claremont bought one, and then I gave one to my undergrad because I was like, I can't do anything with a 12-foot piece. What am I gonna do with it?
Didn't you install one in the desert?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one that I couldn't get rid of. 5 by 10 footer. It had been stored and moved around with me a long time. It was in my brother's studio for a long time, and he makes furniture, and it got really beat up. I eventually remade it because it had gotten beat up and it sold. So I was like, well, I can't have this second one lying around, so I'm going to go just put it in an abandoned gas station in the desert, and then some people destroyed it. But
you took that's right.
Yeah. But it was cool. It's just the scale thing is, it's a very easy, just like, the experience you have with something that's bigger than you is different.
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to talk to you about too is what in your practice is like your curatorial practice. Practice in your work. And you've done 2 exhibitions at your home. Yeah. And you've was it LB to LA or LA to LA to LB?
LALB. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's been great because I've been to both of them, and they you bring in friends or bring in other artists that you look to, and bring them into your home and curate your home as a gallery space.
That started during COVID when everything, shut down, and I do a lot of renderings of my work into space, and instead of like a scale model planning out shows, I render my work into galleries. So I'm used to doing that, and I'm stuck at home right at the beginning of COVID, and I was like, I'm just gonna do like a Photoshop show. This was like March. I mean, it was like early. Yeah. So I just like DM'd Instagram friends. I was like, send me a picture of a piece in your studio, and I'm just gonna and the scale. And I had these blank photos from the gallery I was working with at the time, so I'm just gonna render this show together to scale of me and a bunch of friends. Yeah. Because I can't do anything else right now. It was what everybody was doing anyway. We're like, hey, our show's up. Can't come to the gallery, but here are the pictures. I was like, I can make a show that's just as real as that. Yeah. You can't see it. Right. And everyone's just living shows through whatever. I ended up doing 15 of those during the first year of COVID because it ended up just being fun. Yeah. And I rendered like a solo show of myself into the Whitney. Right. Yeah. And like stupid stuff where I was like, why not? Like they're not gonna. But it was funny because the hammer, and I accompanied that with like a review by Jerry Saltz, and he was like, he didn't write that. But that was a fun project, just with being like, nothing's real right now anyway. Right. Yeah. So why not? And this was like a little bit before everyone kind of started doing like all the virtual fairs and everything. Right. Like that hadn't quite gone yet. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I could whip together these Photoshop shows. Like, let's just do it. So then the one at my house, we bought a house in Long Beach, and it was empty before we moved in. It it was right when things were starting to loosen up with COVID, and I was like, let's do like a pop-up in the house.
That's right,
while it's
yeah.
empty. So again, like texted a bunch of LA people and was like, hey, I'm gonna come by next week with a van. Give me a piece. I'm gonna do a pop-up for like a weekend. And it was just, like a bunch of friends and LA artists. And then like everybody came because we hadn't been able to do anything in a year. And that was a lot of fun. And then I did the same thing when I built my studio in the backyard. Before I moved in, I was like, I'll do another pop-up in the studio. But yeah, those were a lot of fun. And I mean, I don't, a lot of people have come to those shows were like, you're really good at like putting work together. Like you're curating. And I'm like, it's just all the work I like. So that's why it makes sense together. It'd be like this show. It's like, it's just all the artists that I like. That's why it makes sense together. Because they all are just like colorful, you know. But
you had ceramics in there too. And it was like,
I tried to get like the full gamut. And I'm going to be putting a show together, I think, of LA artists, potentially at a gallery in Birmingham.
Oh, okay.
A collector who started a gallery. And we just visited him because we were going through Birmingham, as one does. And I was like, let's do a group show of LA artists out here because like, what's happening in Birmingham? Let's just do it. And he's like, great. So it'll probably be all those same
That's amazing.
usual suspects, like my crew of people. But I enjoy doing that. I don't. I probably will never do another show in our house because now we live there, but it was empty at the time, so like it was good. But I would definitely do more photoshopped shows. Or
because you're doing one in a tennis court, which I remember I was like, how long is that up for? I remember DMing you, and you're like, that's just all Photoshop. I'm like, oh. So I'm like,
a racquetball court.
It was like that was great, which I hope that would actually come into actual fruition because that would be amazing.
Well, the one that piece I installed in the desert in that abandoned gas station. That was the whole point. It was like just the next one in succession. Like, another Photoshop show. But one of the pieces was actually installed out in like past the Joshua Tree Desert. And I was like, go see it. Here's the exit. It's this abandoned gas station right after 10. Go see it. And a couple friends ended up going to see it. But like, I think literally within 7 days, someone had just ripped it to shreds, which was pretty incredible. I mean, it's like a big, heavy piece. And the pieces were all like little. I'm like, someone just had to take out a lot of anger on that piece. But some friends ended up going to see it, which was fun. I would do more of that. I thought about doing an LA pop-up show in that gas station where it's like just a one-day thing. Everybody drives out, we all camp, hang the show, and then it like comes right down and
I think that's a wonderful part of your practice that I really appreciate because it's fun. It's just like taking the the seriousness out of it. But they are like serious shows. They're like they're very these artists they're all doing wonderful things on their own, showing at really great galleries and Brian Rochart was in one of those shows and
a couple of
Julian
them,
Pache and Megan Reed was in the one. Rima,
Justin. Let's see who else. Hillary Petchis. Grant Levy-Lucero.
I was like, oh,
Eric
cool.
Foss.
That's right.
Spencer
Well,
Lewis.
you did the one at. That's right. You did the first one though.
At my framing shop.
At the framing shop. That's right. Yeah,
that was a blast. It's kind of like I feel like, grad school professors would be like, oh yeah, back in the 90s, we would just like gather our friends and like take all this shit out of our living room and then put a show up for 24 hours and then like take it down. I'm like that. I feel like artists have always been doing something like that. So I was like, cool. I need to like meet more artists. Let's just like do stuff like that. Everyone's usually down.
You also trade regularly with artists.
I think Nesbitt. Evan Nesbitt, who's in the show, was in that. I have a big one of his at my house. Almost all the work, potentially only other than like one or two pieces, are trades. That's like the best part about being an artist.
Yeah, right. I go to your house. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like, who's that? Like, and I'm always finding new artists when I go to do a studio visit with you or visit with you guys. So it's really amazing. There was one other thing. Do we have any questions?
If you have something to say.
I'll take a break. Pause right now if you have one.
Do you find yourself connecting to patterns on like the picture behind you, do you see there's a consistency, or are there certain certain colors that complement each other that you seem to kind of always, fall in line with, where it's just like you're looking at this and you're like,
Right.
oh, there's a consistency to some of the color connections between each of these works,
Right.
or not?
Again, since like it's not, I don't have control over what those colors blend to be. If I took a picture of Paul right now, it'd be like white with the blue piece back there, the blue shirt, black pants, black couch. It would kind of be like a medium gray blue probably. So the color that
Cool with that.
comes up, or the color that the average is just based on whatever colors are in the photo. I have a picture. There was these single color portraits that I did. There's one of my wife standing in the snow. It's like all white, and she's wearing a burgundy sweater. And so it's mostly like light gray with like a very small hint of leaning towards like pink. And it's like, yeah, had she been wearing a green sweater, it would be leaning a little bit green or whatever. But so with these, again, like I'm not like, cool, I'm gonna gather a bunch of reds or something. This just ended up being, but speaking of reds, what's funny, I don't know if you can, the angle you can see that, but when I made this piece, and I posted a picture of it, someone was like, but like the two reds are touching. Like joking, because it's like you can't, like your mind is like, no, like you need to separate those. And from making these for such a long time, I found the little moments where like that blue and that yellow right there, that's like really vibrant, and that line sort of like hurts your eyes to look at almost. And then you have these reds, or those two burgundies, or maybe these two light grays, where they disrupt the perfect grid of it, and they almost form like a rectangle, which sort of like screws with the flow, some would say, but I would say it actually creates the balance of it. So I don't end up finding a rhythm where it's like, oh yeah, I've always got my swath of grays and blues and whatever. It ends up kind of how it ends up. And sometimes I'll make all the squares, put them into a grid, and be like, that is not a good group. Like there's too many browns or something, or like it just doesn't work. And I'll work it for like days, and I'll be like, okay, that one's getting the boot. Like it just doesn't. It never works itself out. But some of them like this, where the colors are so diverse, it's like, okay, there's gonna be something that can work here for sure. But I usually end up making batches of them, so I'll spend 3 weeks and I'll make 20 pieces. And it's weird when I look back at the groups of those pieces, they kind of do all have a similar feel from the same batch, which is weird because it doesn't really make any sense. Because it's not like I'm hunting out like pictures of green things, except for the pieces that I do that. where it's like, like 5 red paintings from the collection of MoMA or whatever. That's a different thing. No, that there's, other than trying to find ways to disrupt that sort of every other rhythm, I think every grid you'll find 2 colors that are really close together that you would probably be like, why did he put those next to each other? And that's the exact reason why. It's because then you landed on it. And it made you think about it, or even it just made you think about, why did he do it that way? Yeah.
Yeah. Is there another one?
Yeah, there was actually one that kind of followed up that was do you keep track of like the color codes that you use? And have you ever, with the randomness of it all, have you ever come up with the same color code?
So it's an action that I created in Photoshop, and how it works is, I'll take a photograph and I compress it to a 1x1 pixel. If it's a normal size photo, it's 2,000 by 3,000 pixels, and then I just compress it to a single one, and then enlarge that single pixel back to like 300 by 300. So I don't then like grab that color and see what hex code or anything it is. It's just like that's the color and that square goes into the grid and then I arrange the grid. So no, the short answer is no. But one of the earliest ones I made that I mentioned earlier, which the satellite images of LA and New York, those are like, hair's difference. It's like those two burgundies, really, really close, which initially the idea was like, let's just see if the color averages of these two cities that are similar in a lot of ways, but also like the perfect opposites of the U.S. in a lot of ways. And it's like, well, according to space and this algorithm, they're almost exactly the same. But no, I don't go in afterwards and grab the hex codes or anything like that.
Again, just jumping back to the curation part. So do you work with a gallery though? And I've noticed you've done a lot of things with a gallery in Denmark. Is that right? Is that a continual gallery that you work with there?
That's his name's Peter, and he has a gallery called Sunday S Projects. And during COVID, just like everybody, like everything was shuttered.
Yeah.
And when I was photoshopping my work into galleries and museums all over the world,
Right.
I photoshopped some work into his gallery.
Yeah.
And he just hit me up and was like, hey, I love this. Do you want to like make it a real show? And I was like, yeah, okay. So I just like sent him more images and then sent him the details of all the pieces.
Yeah.
And then we ended up doing a bunch because he has like a summer place on the coast that has this really cool, this little gallery in like this old barn.
Cool.
And he has a couple spaces all over the city. So that was just, almost all of these are just like Instagram relationships that flourished.
Crazy.
He and I have never even met. But we're definitely homies.
Yeah.
And, I've done, like 8 projects with him.
Yeah.
Group shows and like solo shows and stuff. He has a piece of mine because he's also a collector. But yeah, that's, other than that, I stopped working with my LA gallery 2 years ago and am just floating around.
Cool. And I guess speaking of that, like, do you have any big projects that you want to see kind of come into fruition?
Yeah.
That you're working
There's
on?
a buddy of mine, Matthew Field, who we've, again, never met, but I would count him on like my close art homies list.
Okay.
Canadian artist, and he makes like some of my favorite work. We traded work maybe like 8 years ago. We've been wanting to do a show together for a long time because he makes these really beautiful circular monochrome paintings. And we've always wanted to do a show of his circles and my grids. It'd be like circles and squares. And like each of us in turn have been like, well, maybe so-and-so will do the show, maybe so-and-so will do the show, blah, blah, blah. So I think we found someone to do that show, which that maybe end of this year, beginning of next year, something like that will be fun. And then hopefully putting together an LA group show with this collector in Birmingham. And
How'd you end up going to Birmingham? Like, what brought you there?
during COVID, when we couldn't really travel, my wife and I were like, let's try and go to all 50 states. So we almost got all of them done,
Really?
and she had a couple left, and one of them was Alabama.
That's amazing.
So I was like, well, let's go to Alabama, and we'll see Scott and Tina in Birmingham. So, yeah.
How long did that take you guys to do that?
I had been to a whole lot on tour a long time
Oh,
ago.
that's right.
So
That's right.
then,
You played music too.
Yeah.
That's right. Just check that one off the list too.
So I only needed like a dozen.
Yeah.
The hard ones like Maine and Alaska and like stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we finished those. She's at 49. We have to go to Pennsylvania next month, and she'll be 50. And I did my 50 like last year. So
Dang, that's awesome. What a great accomplishment.
it was like
That's so
something I
fun.
never even cared about doing.
Right.
And then one day we're just like, how many states do you do? I was like, I don't know. Let me count. And it was like 44. I was like, oh. Maybe we should just go to those other 6 because, like, why not?
Yeah.
Can't go abroad right now, and we like traveling. So
Right.
like, oh, cool. Let's go to Iowa. Like, that's going to be a great trip, So, no offense if you live in Iowa.
No, that's really. I hope to do that one day. That'd be really fun. My wife always has wanted to go and do that. So, anyways, we'll see. maybe we could get the kids to cooperate and do that.
Yeah.
So, which would be a whole other thing. So, yeah. But no, that sounds that'd be cool to do the LA show in Birmingham. So yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah. We had one more come in, and it was, are there any family art collabs coming up with, I think maybe your brother, Eric?
I wonder who asked that question. I think, I don't know. It specifically, no, but again, like he and I would always want to do stuff together. We randomly, maybe like 8 years ago, somebody reached out to me and so I could like to buy a piece. I was like, great. They bought a piece. I shipped it out to New York. They sent me a picture of it like on their wall, and he had 2 of my brother's chairs in his living room beneath the piece. Oh. And we hadn't made that connection.
Yeah.
And then I was sent my brother, because I was like, hey, either someone ripped you off or like, do you know this guy? Did he buy some chairs from you? And he was like, yeah. I was like, oh, he has a piece of mine. Yeah. So we've done accidental collabs. And he collaborated on that piece that was stored in his studio for 8 years and just slowly got damaged and then brought out to the desert. But no, and he was in all of the group shows that I did. Yeah. Yeah. He had a really great piece that was just like this, like probably 30-pound block of polished aluminum, just like a solid 6 by 6 inch by 12 on the plinth, and it was just like this hilarious, crazy object in it was at my house. It was in our closet, our empty closet. With just like purple neon lights. So you just walked in and it was like this crazy, like optical experience.
I think it scared my son.
Oh yeah, oh, for sure.
He didn't want to go in there.
For sure. Yeah, that would be, as a child, you'd be like, if I touch that thing, I'm gonna like go to a different universe. Right. No, yeah, I think, the dream would be like eventually, like he and I curate like because he did a SoCal design show or California design show. Yeah.
Right before COVID, like the downtown space.
Yeah, the dream would be like co-collaboration or like co-curation of like Long Beach art and design show curated by the Trine brothers. Yeah. You can just
let's talk.
We'll put that on the docket.
Just saying.
Yeah.
So and Evan and Eric both are grown up in Long Beach or Long Beach.
Yeah, I mean our house was in Los Al, but everything we did was in Long Beach. So
so you guys have always been very supportive of the Long Beach arts community, which has been amazing, and have been very active in that. So I appreciate you guys for doing that and celebrating that. But any other questions? No. Yeah, I think we're about at an hour.
Cool.
So thanks for coming by.
Right on,
It's
man.
good to hang out on the couch with you and chill. So
man.
that's it. So Color Fields is up until August 20th, and we're open from Thursday through Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Come down and check it out. We're gonna do a couple more of these artists beyond the frame talks here, and a couple other art workshop activations downstairs with family art making. So thank you all for tuning in. Really appreciate you all, and thank you.
Thanks.
Cool.